Someone says something unfair about you. They twist your words, accuse you of something you didn't mean, maybe even disrespect you right to your face. And you feel it, that hot rush in your chest, the tightness in your throat, your mind screaming, "That's not true. Say something." But what actually comes out of your mouth? Nothing. Maybe a small laugh. Maybe a quiet, "It's fine. Don't worry about it." Maybe you even change the subject to make them comfortable. And later, alone, you replay it over and over. What you could have said, what you should have said, the perfect comeback that arrived 3 hours too late. So here's the uncomfortable question. Why do you not defend yourself? Not in theory, not in inspirational quotes, in real life, in those moments that actually matter. Because you already know you're supposed to stand up for yourself. You've heard it 1,000 times. Everyone loves to tell you, just be assertive, just say no, just don't let them treat you like that. But nobody explains why your body locks up when you try, why your voice disappears, why you feel guilty for even thinking about pushing back. So that's what I want to do with you right now. Not judging you, not shaming you, just putting language to what you've been feeling for years, maybe decades. Because once you understand the psychology of people who don't defend themselves, a lot of things about you suddenly make sense. The situations you attracted, the people you tolerated, the arguments you avoided, the boundaries you never set, and more importantly, it stops feeling like something is wrong with me and starts looking like, oh, there's a pattern here and I can change it. So let me ask you this. When was the first time you remember staying quiet when you were hurt? Just let your mind go there for a second. Maybe it's a parent snapping at you, a teacher embarrassing you in front of the class, a sibling blaming you for something they did, a partner making a cruel joke for fun. And what did you do? You swallowed it. You stayed quiet because somewhere inside you, the calculation had already been made. Speaking up is more dangerous than staying silent. That's the core of it. On the outside, it looks like passivity, like weakness, like they just don't have a backbone. On the inside, it's strategy. A strategy your nervous system learned a long time ago. If I stay small, if I stay quiet, if I don't cause trouble, maybe I'll be safe. This is the part most people don't get. They think defending yourself is just about confidence. Like, if you loved yourself more, you'd clap back, you'd set a boundary, you'd leave. But for people who don't defend themselves, it's not just a confidence issue. It's a survival issue. Your brain is not thinking, how do I win this argument? Your brain is thinking, how do I avoid losing everything? And everything can mean a lot of things. Love, approval, safety, belonging, the relationship, your job, your reputation. So let's break this down together. There are a few deep psychological patterns that show up again and again in people who struggle to defend themselves. As you listen, notice which ones feel true for you. You don't have to force anything. Just notice where your body goes, what memories pop up, what you want to deny but can't quite shake. Because if you recognize yourself in any of this, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're understandable. Let's start with something big. You learned that being good meant being quiet. Think about how praise worked when you were younger. Were you praised for being outspoken, honest, and direct? Or were you praised for being easy to deal with, mature for your age, so well behaved? A lot of people who don't defend themselves were the good kid, the one who didn't talk back, the one who didn't cause drama, the one adults bragged about to other adults. You might have heard things like, she never complains, he's so chill, she's such a sweetheart, she never gives us any trouble. Those sound like compliments, right? And they felt good, because as a child, approval is oxygen. It's everything. But what's the hidden message behind that praise? I love you when you're convenient. I love you when you don't challenge me. I love you when your needs are easy, small, or invisible. So you learn to make them invisible. You learn to swallow your frustration instead of expressing it. You learn to turn your anger inward into self-criticism instead of outward into self-protection. And every time you did that, you were rewarded. You got peace. You got praise. You got to avoid conflict. So your brain stored that pattern as truth. My needs are dangerous. My silence is safe. Fast forward to adulthood. Someone crosses a line with you. Your first instinct is not, how dare they? Your first instinct is, how can I make this go away with the least disruption possible? And that usually means you downplay what happened. You rationalize their behavior. You search for how it might be your fault. And only when you're alone do you feel the full weight of what happened and think, why didn't I say anything? Because the part of you that wants to be respected is awake, but the part of you that wants to be safe has been trained longer. You've probably felt that split. One voice saying, speak up. Another voice saying, don't you dare, you'll make it worse. They'll leave. They'll hate you. You'll look crazy. You'll lose your job. You'll start a fight you can't handle. And usually, that second voice wins. Now, there's another layer to this that goes even deeper. For a lot of people who don't defend themselves, anger feels unsafe. Not anger in general. You've seen other people's anger. Maybe you grew up with it. Screaming, slamming doors, the cold, silent treatment, emotional explosions that came out of nowhere. So your brain paired anger with danger. You might have had caregivers who blew up when you disagreed, punished you for having an opinion, turned everything into a fight, made you responsible for their emotional stability. So at some point, you made a quiet decision. I will not be like them. I will not be the one who shouts. I will not be the one who hurts people. I will not be the source of chaos. And because you didn't know there was a difference between destructive anger and healthy anger, you put everything in one box and locked it. You didn't just repress rage. You repressed your ability to say, no, that's not okay. Anger is the emotion that says, a boundary has been crossed. If you don't feel your anger, or you feel it but don't allow it, then when that boundary gets crossed, nothing comes out. You freeze. On the outside, you look calm, maybe even agreeable. On the inside, you're flooded. Your nervous system is in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode. You're not thinking clearly. You're scanning for, what do I say that won't blow this up? You might even laugh along with something that hurt you, and then feel betrayed by your own reaction later. That laugh you use to brush things off, that it's fine, don't worry about it, that's not you being weak. That's your nervous system choosing the fawn response. Appease, pacify, make them comfortable so they don't become dangerous. People often think there are only two types, fighters and runners, but fawn is just as real. It's when your brain says, if I make you happy, you won't hurt me. If you've ever smiled through something painful, apologized when you did nothing wrong, or rushed to soothe the person who actually hurt you, that's fawning. And if that sounds a little too familiar, you're not alone. Let's talk about another big piece, your identity. When people don't defend themselves, it's often because they've built their whole identity around being the understanding one, the patient one, the forgiving one, the rational one, the I can see both sides one, the one everyone goes to because you're so calm, you never overreact. It becomes your role in relationships. You might even be proud of it in some ways because you actually are understanding. You actually do see nuance. You actually can empathize with people, even when they're wrong. But here's the trap. If your identity is built on being understanding, then standing up for yourself can feel like betraying that identity. Suddenly, you're not the chill one anymore. You're difficult. You're sensitive. You're making things complicated. And so unconsciously, you protect that identity more than you protect yourself. You defend others more than you defend yourself. You justify their behavior more than you question it. You give infinite chances, but never to you, only to them. It's almost like you've decided, My job is to carry the emotional weight so other people don't have to. That's why you might notice this pattern. When someone mistreats you, your first instinct is to think about what they've been through. Maybe they had a rough childhood. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe they're insecure. Maybe they don't know any better. You become their defense attorney in your own mind before you ever become your own. And again, it makes sense. If you grew up in environments where understanding the other person's mood kept you safe, then scanning for why are they like this is not just empathy, it's self-defense. Because if you can predict them, maybe you can avoid the worst of it. Now let's talk about something that's uncomfortable but important. On some level, you may not fully believe you deserve to be defended. You might say, you do. You might say, of course I deserve respect. But when it comes down to it, when you're mistreated, something inside you whispers, maybe I provoked it. Maybe I should have been clearer. Maybe I really am too much. Maybe I expect too much. Maybe this is just how relationships are. Low self-worth doesn't always show up as, I hate myself. Sometimes it shows up as a quiet acceptance of unfair treatment. You normalize it. You tell yourself, it's not that bad. You compare your pain to someone else's and think, other people have it worse. I should be grateful. You collect evidence against yourself and ignore evidence in your favor. So when someone crosses a line, it doesn't even occur to you that a normal, healthy response would be to say, no, that's not acceptable. Your threshold for disrespect has been raised so high that you only react to extreme situations. Everything below that, you tolerate. You've probably had moments where someone hears your story and says, I can't believe you put up with that. And you're like, wait, that's not normal? Because to you, it was just Tuesday. Now here's where it gets even trickier. There is often a hidden fear of consequences, not imagined consequences, real ones. If you defend yourself with a parent, you might risk losing their financial help, their approval, or stirring up a family war. If you defend yourself in a relationship, you might risk a breakup. If you defend yourself at work, you might risk being sidelined, labeled difficult, or even fired. It's easy for someone else to say, just stand up for yourself. But they're not the one who has to live with what happens after. So you run mental simulations. You imagine how the conversation will go. You imagine them yelling, crying, attacking, leaving, turning others against you. You feel anxious just thinking about it. And your brain, trying to protect you, says, let's not do that. So you don't. You stay silent. You swallow the resentment. You tell yourself, I'll say something next time. But the next time feels just as risky. Here's the thing, though. Not defending yourself is also a decision with consequences. They're just slower. You lose trust in yourself a little bit each time. You start to feel small in your own life. You become a side character in your own story. You adapt to people instead of asking, do I even want this person, this environment, this dynamic in my life? You might notice yourself feeling tired all the time, drained after every interaction, numb, detached, or like you're watching your life instead of living it. That's the cost of never defending yourself, and I want you to really hear this. You're not weak for ending up here. You're adaptive. If you grew up in chaos, being quiet was smart. If you grew up around explosive people, avoiding conflict was logical. If you were punished for speaking up, staying small was survival. The problem isn't that you learned that strategy. The problem is that nobody ever helped you update it. You're still using survival strategies from a past environment in a present that might be safer than your body thinks. So, what actually has to change? Because it's not as simple as just speak up. If it were, you would have done that already. The shift usually starts in two places: how you relate to your anger and how you relate to your worth. Let's talk about anger first. A lot of people who never defend themselves think of anger as this wild, uncontrollable force that ruins relationships. They've seen anger used as a weapon. But healthy anger isn't about screaming. Healthy anger is a signal, a notification from your nervous system that says, hey, something about this is not okay for us. If you ignore that notification over and over, you don't become peaceful. You become resentful and disconnected from yourself. So, part of changing this pattern is quietly allowing yourself to feel anger without immediately shutting it down or moralizing it. You don't have to act on it right away. You don't have to express it perfectly. Just acknowledge it. Yeah, that stung. Yeah, that was disrespectful. Yeah, I didn't like that. For some of you, that alone is huge, because you've spent your entire life gaslighting your own reactions. Whenever you felt anger, you told yourself, I'm overreacting. Whenever you felt hurt, you said, it's not a big deal. So your system stopped trusting your own signals. You became easier to manipulate, easier to override, easier to silence. Rebuilding that trust means letting your inner voice be honest, even if you never say it out loud to anyone else at first. You can think, that was messed up, without immediately chasing it with, but I'm probably just being sensitive. The second piece is your worth. You will always struggle to defend what you don't truly believe is valuable. If deep down you believe your comfort is negotiable, your needs are optional, and your presence in people's lives is a favor, they're doing you, then of course you'll hesitate to stand your ground. You'll be grateful for crumbs. You'll tolerate half-effort, half-truths, half-respect. You'll rationalize it as realistic. But when you start to see yourself as someone whose feelings matter just as much as the other person's, something shifts. Suddenly, you're not asking for special treatment. You're asking for basic mutual respect. Suddenly, you're not thinking, am I being too much? You're thinking, why am I okay with being this little in this dynamic? That shift doesn't magically make things easy. It does, however, make silence more uncomfortable. There comes a point where not defending yourself hurts more than the risk of conflict. You reach a moment where your loyalty to yourself finally outweighs your fear of their reaction. You might be approaching that point right now. Maybe that's why this topic even pulled you in. Part of you is tired of replaying conversations in your head, tired of feeling like people don't know the real you, because the real you is always edited down to be acceptable. Tired of being the one who understands everyone, but feels deeply misunderstood. So let me say this directly. If you feel guilty for not defending yourself in the past, you don't have to. You did what you knew. You responded with the tools and safety levels you had. The question now is not, why am I like this? In a self-hating way. It's, do I still want to be like this? And if the answer is no, then the next step isn't to jump from complete silence to explosive confrontation. That's what scares you. The next step is tiny, almost invisible acts of self-defense, like not laughing when something isn't funny, like not saying, it's okay when it isn't, like taking a pause before responding instead of instantly smoothing things over, like saying, I didn't like that in low-stakes situations. Like allowing yourself to say, actually, I disagree, in a conversation where previously you would have nodded along. These small acts do something huge. They teach your nervous system that defending yourself does not automatically equal disaster. You start collecting new evidence. Wow, I spoke up and they handled it well. I said how I felt and the world didn't end. They got defensive. But I survived that too. Sometimes you'll lose people. But here's the hard truth. If someone can only love you when you don't defend yourself, do they really love you? Or do they love their version of you? The quiet, convenient version. The version that doesn't challenge them. The version that absorbs all their sharp edges and never complains. When you begin to defend yourself, those people either adjust or they leave. And that can be painful. But it also makes room for different kinds of people. People who can handle no. People who can say, you're right, I crossed a line. People who actually feel safer around you when you have boundaries, because they don't feel the burden of your silent resentment. One of the most powerful things you can realize is this. Defending yourself isn't just about protecting you from others. It's also about protecting others from the future version of you who has had enough, explodes, and never comes back. When you don't defend yourself for years, your breaking point comes out of nowhere for the people around you. They think everything was fine because you made it look fine. You kept making yourself smaller instead of saying, "This hurts." So your anger accumulates in the background, and one day, something small happens, and you're done. You ghost, you cut off, you burn bridges, you become the crazy one in their story, and they're genuinely confused because you never defended yourself, you never showed them the impact. Defending yourself earlier, in smaller ways, gives people a chance to course correct, gives relationships a chance to evolve instead of abruptly ending. So, in a weird way, defending yourself is actually an act of honesty and fairness. It says, I'm going to let you know where my line is, so that if you cross it, it's a choice, not an accident. Now, I want to ask you something. What's one situation, just one, where you still feel pain because you didn't defend yourself? Maybe it was years ago. Maybe it still stings when you think about it. Notice how emotional that memory still is. That's the cost of silence. Not just the moment itself, but the echo. And I'm not saying this to shame you. I'm saying it so you understand why your brain keeps replaying it. It's like your mind is trying to rewrite that scene to give you back that moment where you say what you needed to say. You can't go back and change what happened, but you can use that memory as a promise to yourself, a quiet vow. Next time I feel this familiar feeling in my chest, I won't abandon myself. That's really what self-defense is. It's refusing to abandon yourself in the moment. Sometimes that looks like words. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to justify yourself to someone who has already decided not to understand you. Sometimes it looks like saying less, not more. People think defending yourself is always explaining, arguing, proving, but often the most powerful form of self-defense is simply standing firm. I hear you. I still disagree. I'm not okay with being spoken to like that. If this continues, I'm going to leave. You don't have to justify your boundary with a 10-slide presentation. You're allowed to not like something and say so. You're allowed to have limits. You're allowed to not be endlessly accommodating. And yes, some people will call that selfish, especially if they benefited from your lack of boundaries. But here's something to remember. The people who profit from your silence are not a reliable source on how loud you're allowed to be. Of course they want you quiet. Of course they want you agreeable. Of course they want you forgiving. That doesn't mean they're right. So if you've spent years not defending yourself and you're scared that changing will make you a bad person, ask yourself, would I call someone else bad for doing what I'm trying to do? Would I judge a friend for saying, I don't like how I'm being treated? Or would I be proud of them? Most likely, you'd cheer them on. You'd say, finally, I'm glad you said something. You deserve better. You're just not used to offering that same support to yourself. So maybe that's your next small step. When you even consider defending yourself and that guilt creeps in, imagine how you'd react if it was happening to someone you cared about. Borrow that compassion. Borrow that clarity. You don't have to feel worthy yet to act like you are. Sometimes the actions come first. You speak up while still shaking. You say no while still doubting yourself. You set a boundary while still wondering if you're overreacting. That's okay. Courage isn't, I feel 100% confident. Courage is, I'm scared and I'm doing it anyway. The more you do it, the more your inner landscape changes. The more you realize, I can survive conflict. I can handle someone being disappointed. I can tolerate someone being mad at me without collapsing. You start to become someone you trust, someone who has your back. And once you experience that, once you feel what it's like to not abandon yourself, silence starts to feel less like safety and more like self-betrayal. You won't be perfect at this. You'll still miss moments. You'll still have times where you will walk away thinking, I wish I'd said something. But instead of turning that into a weapon against yourself, you can treat it as practice. Like, okay, that's how I handled it this time. Next time, maybe I'll say one more sentence. Maybe I'll pause before I self-abandon. You've had years of training in staying quiet. You're not going to undo that overnight. But every small act of self-defense is a vote for the person you're becoming. So if you see yourself in any of this, if you're the person who doesn't defend themselves, who freezes, who fawns, who rationalizes, who regrets, hear this. You are not weak for ending up here. You're not stupid for tolerating what you did. You're not broken for avoiding conflict. You are someone whose nervous system learned to survive, and now you are someone who gets to learn how to live. And living, real living, includes being allowed to say, that hurt. I don't agree. I'm not okay with this. I deserve better than this. Self-defense doesn't mean you become aggressive, rude, or heartless. It means you finally step into your own life as a full participant, not just a background character trying not to make a mess. There will always be people who don't like that. There will always be people who preferred the version of you who never defended themselves. Let them go. The people who are meant for the real you will not require your self-betrayal as the price of admission. And if you're still wondering, where do I even start? Remember, you don't have to confront your biggest fear first. You don't have to go back to the person who hurt you the most and deliver a perfect speech. You can start with the next small moment, the next offhand joke that doesn't feel good, the next time someone interrupts you, the next time you're about to say, it's fine, when it isn't. Catch yourself, just once, and choose a slightly more honest response. I didn't like that. Let me finish. Actually, it's not fine. One sentence might not change the world, but it might change how you feel about yourself when you go to bed that night. And that, slowly, is how people who never defended themselves begin to transform, not by becoming someone else, but by finally becoming someone who is willing to stand beside themselves, even when it's uncomfortable. You've already spent so much of your life protecting other people from discomfort. Maybe it's time to protect you.